In the negotiations that the president is trying to seek a ceasefire and a peace between Ukraine and Russia, I would like to ask you why the president has not considered using maximum pressure on Russia to ensure, which we have the ability to do so. Sanctions are being considered, as you know, over in the Senate, additional sanctions, to pressure Russia into a ceasefire mode and to a peace agreement, realizing that they've broken the last 3 agreements they've had with Ukraine in the last 20 years.
Well, I think the president has made clear that he understands clearly he has options with increased sanctions on Russia if necessary. He would prefer that they agree to a peace deal. And so it's a process of trying to encourage them to reach peace. If ultimately that doesn't work, the president has publicly stated he's very well aware of the sanctions options, devastating sanctions options that he has.
And I just want to make sure that we're clear about this because we have leverage.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to America First, the channel that puts American interests above all else. If you're new here, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe because we're delivering truth that the mainstream media won't tell you. And if you want to support real patriotic content, head over to patreon.com/AmericaFirst, where you can support us for as low as $5 a month. Every dollar helps us keep fighting for America's future. Today, we're breaking down this absolutely explosive exchange between California Democrat Jim Costa and our new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. This is the kind of hearing that exposes exactly what's wrong with the establishment's approach to foreign policy and why President Trump's America First strategy is exactly what we need right now.
Mr. Secretary, there are a couple different issues I want to touch upon here that have been raised, but I would like clarity on. First of all, would you agree that the transatlantic alliance, the partnership post-World War II, has been a hallmark of freedom throughout the world?
Yes, and it continues to be a strong feature of our foreign policy.
Yes. You said that you had not discussed post-closures as it relates to those in Europe as part of your overhaul of the State Department. 4 are in France, 3 in Germany, 1 in Italy, 1 in Portugal, 1 in Brazil, not Europe. But and then I thought you said that no determination has yet been made with those post-closures?
No, there was an article. Some of these are cultural places, like, I forget the exact ones, but they're not even embassies or consulates. But they're not being closed, but I don't know where these things are coming from. I mean, people are putting stuff out there. Now,
if you could respond with a letter on that point, I would appreciate that.
Sure. Well, I can tell you this. If
the
we find a
Consul
post
General
that's
I know
wasteful,
in
we'll
Portugal
close it. But
is our oldest.
What's that?
And the Consul General's post in Portugal is our oldest historically.
I don't know where that's coming from. I mean, that's a press report.
We'll clear that up later on. Mr. Secretary, America has been the beacon of light for democracy, post-World War II certainly, and almost every president has been used as a voice of a defender of democratic principles. Do you agree that China and Russia are our adversaries today, along with Iran, I might add?
I think both, well, there's no doubt in the case of China seeks to replace us on the world stage as the world's most powerful country. In the case of Russia, they clearly do not support a world order in which the United States plays the role it's currently played, so they're an adversary in that front. In the case of Iran, they're a threat to regional peace. I wouldn't say they're a global threat, but they're an increasing threat.
No, I understand. And I would even go further. I consider today modern-day Russia a syndicate masquerading as a country with a mob boss called Putin. And so in these negotiations, I want to do a comparative analogy. The president has indicated that with Iran, as we've noted, that maximum pressure are the tactics that will be used to engage Iran to ensure that they do not obtain nuclear capability. Is that correct?
Maximum pressure on Iran?
Right.
As compelling them to not seek a nuclear weapon?
Right.
Correct. Or the alternative is worse?
Yes. In the negotiations that the president is trying to seek a ceasefire and a peace between Ukraine and Russia, I would like to ask you why the president has not considered using maximum pressure on Russia to ensure, which we have the ability to do so. Sanctions are being considered, as you know, over in the Senate, additional sanctions, to pressure Russia into a ceasefire mode and to a peace agreement, realizing that they've broken the last 3 agreements they've had with Ukraine in the last 20 years.
Well, I think the president has made clear that he understands clearly he has options with increased sanctions on Russia if necessary. He would prefer that they agree to a peace deal. And so it's a process of trying to encourage them to reach peace. If ultimately that doesn't work, the president has publicly stated he's very well aware of the sanctions options, devastating sanctions options that he has.
And I just want to make sure that we're clear about this, because we have leverage on Russia. And it's not clear to me that we're using it in the same sense that we're using it with Iran. And I think, frankly, we and our allies must be together in defending democracy. And certainly Ukraine is a democratic and tending to become more democratic, wants to join with the West, with the European Union, as well as ultimately with NATO. And I think Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states are watching very carefully to America's commitment to Ukraine. Let me go on quickly here. The effort was raised, and you commented on Armenia and Azerbaijan, another country that, Azerbaijan, that has not kept its commitments in the Minsk Accord. We've tried to get Republican and Democratic administrations to forego the waiver on Section 907 on military aid to Azerbaijan. Finally, last year, the Biden administration rightfully refused to issue the waiver. I think it should be permanent. What is your position, and will you commit to not resisting Section 907 waiver again this year that would block military aid to Azerbaijan?
Well, we haven't made a determination on that yet, because what we're focused on right now is getting them to agree to a peace agreement that does not cause them to invade a neighboring country in Armenia. We would like to prevent that from happening. The president's very committed to preventing wars, and we've tried to outline to both sides, especially the Azerbaijani side, the tremendous benefits that would come from signing a peace deal and not engaging in a war that we would find to be destructive, counterproductive, and the last thing we need right now in the region.
And Armenia is looking for our help and our support.
Let me start by saying something that might surprise some of you. Representative Costa actually asked some legitimate questions here, even though I disagree fundamentally with his approach and his underlying assumptions. The man called Russia a syndicate masquerading as a country with a mob boss called Putin. Now, folks, while Putin is certainly no saint and Russia is absolutely an adversary, this kind of inflammatory rhetoric from a sitting congressman shows exactly the kind of thinking that got us into endless wars in the first place. But here's where Costa really reveals the deep state establishment mindset. He's demanding to know why President Trump isn't using maximum pressure on Russia the same way we're using it on Iran. This question exposes everything wrong with the foreign policy blob's thinking. These people want to treat every international situation like it's exactly the same, like you can just copy and paste strategies without considering the massive differences in context, capability, and consequences. Let's talk about Iran first, because this is where Trump's approach is absolutely brilliant. Iran is a regional power that sponsors terrorism, threatens our ally Israel, and is actively pursuing nuclear weapons. They're isolated internationally. Their economy is already struggling, and they don't have the military capability to seriously threaten American forces or allies in conventional war. Maximum pressure works against Iran because we can squeeze them economically and diplomatically without risking global catastrophe. Russia is a completely different animal, and this is where Secretary Rubio showed real diplomatic wisdom in his response. Russia is a nuclear superpower with thousands of warheads pointed at American cities. They have the world's largest territory, massive natural resources, and despite their economic problems, they still have significant military capabilities. Most importantly, they have China increasingly in their corner, creating a potential axis that could challenge American hegemony globally. Here's what Costa and the establishment don't understand about Trump's approach to Russia and Ukraine. President Trump isn't being weak on Russia, he's being smart. He understands that nuclear powers require a different approach than regional troublemakers. When you're dealing with someone who has the capability to end civilization as we know it, you use carrots and sticks carefully, not maximum pressure from day one. The Ukrainian situation is complex, and frankly, it's a situation that the Biden administration completely mishandled from the beginning. For 4 years, Biden and his team escalated tensions with Russia while providing just enough support to Ukraine to keep the conflict going, but not enough to actually win. They turned Ukraine into a proxy war playground instead of either staying out completely or committing to actually defeating Russia. Trump's approach is fundamentally different. He wants to end this war quickly because every day it continues, more Ukrainian and Russian soldiers die, more Ukrainian civilians suffer, and the risk of nuclear escalation increases. The establishment thinks this makes Trump weak, but it actually shows he's the only adult in the room willing to prioritize human life and American interests over geopolitical games. When Rubio mentioned that Trump has devastating sanctions options available if negotiations fail, he was sending a clear message to Putin. Trump isn't approaching from weakness. He's approaching from a position of strength, but with the wisdom to try diplomacy first. This is exactly the kind of peace-through-strength approach that Ronald Reagan used so effectively. Costa's comparison to Iran also ignores some crucial realities about our sanctions capabilities. We've already sanctioned Russia extensively, and while we certainly have more options, the law of diminishing returns applies here. Russia has had years to build sanctions-resistant economic systems, develop alternative trading relationships, particularly with China and India, and reduce their dependence on Western financial systems. More importantly, maximum pressure sanctions often hurt ordinary people more than they hurt authoritarian leaders. Look at Cuba, where decades of maximum pressure haven't changed the regime, but have certainly made life harder for regular Cubans. Putin doesn't care if Russian citizens suffer. He cares about maintaining power. The most effective pressure on Putin comes through demonstrating strength and resolve while offering him a face-saving way to end a conflict that's become far more costly than he ever anticipated. The other thing Costa gets completely wrong is this idea that we need to apply the same approach to every adversary to maintain credibility. This is exactly the kind of thinking that led to the disastrous foreign policy decisions of the past decades. Every situation is unique. Every adversary has different capabilities and motivations. Treating them all the same is a recipe for disaster. Iran's nuclear program is an existential threat to Israel and a destabilizing force in the Middle East. The Iranian regime is also much more vulnerable to economic pressure because their economy is already isolated and struggling. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, while absolutely wrong and illegal, is fundamentally a territorial dispute between neighboring countries, not a direct threat to American homeland security. This doesn't mean we ignore Ukraine or abandon our allies. It means we approach each situation with the strategy most likely to achieve our objectives while minimizing risk to American interests and lives. Sometimes that's maximum pressure. Sometimes it's diplomatic engagement backed by the credible threat of force. Secretary Rubio's response showed exactly the kind of sophisticated thinking we need in American foreign policy. He acknowledged that tougher sanctions remain an option while explaining why diplomacy is the preferred first approach. This isn't weakness, it's strategic thinking. The establishment foreign policy blob has been wrong about virtually everything for the past 20 years. They told us invading Iraq would bring democracy to the Middle East. They told us nation-building in Afghanistan would create a stable ally. They told us that supporting regime change in Libya would improve stability. They told us that getting involved in Syria's civil war would bring peace. Every single one of these interventions made things worse, not better. Now these same people want to pressure Trump into escalating with a nuclear power because they think anything short of maximum pressure shows weakness. This is exactly the kind of thinking that could stumble us into World War III. Costa also brought up this point about our European allies watching our commitment to Ukraine. Here's the thing about our European allies: they've been free-riding on American military spending and commitment for decades. They're perfectly happy to lecture us about our obligations while contributing minimal resources themselves. Germany spent years making themselves dependent on Russian energy while we warned them about the risks. France and other European powers have their own relationships with Russia that they've maintained even during this conflict. If European security is so important to Europeans, then Europeans need to step up and provide the bulk of the resources to defend it. American taxpayers shouldn't be expected to carry the primary burden of defending Europe's eastern frontier while Europeans spend their money on social programs instead of defense. The mention of Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states is important, though. These countries have legitimate security concerns, and they've actually been good allies who meet their NATO obligations. Trump's approach recognizes the difference between allies who contribute their fair share and those who don't. But even with our most committed allies, we need to be smart about how we approach the Russia challenge. Escalating to maximum pressure sanctions could actually make things worse for these frontline states if it pushes Russia toward more desperate measures or closer alignment with China. The discussion about Azerbaijan and Armenia also reveals the complexity of international relations that the establishment often ignores. Costa wants to permanently block military aid to Azerbaijan over their conflict with Armenia, but this is exactly the kind of black and white thinking that creates more problems than it solves. Both Azerbaijan and Armenia have legitimate grievances. Both have committed actions we'd prefer they hadn't. And both are important in the broader geopolitical context of containing Iranian influence and maintaining energy security. Cutting off one side completely doesn't solve the underlying conflict. It just pushes them toward other partners, potentially including Russia or Iran. Trump's approach of trying to broker peace agreements rather than picking sides and imposing permanent punishments is far more likely to actually resolve these conflicts and advance American interests. The broader theme here is that the establishment wants simple, rigid approaches to complex international problems. They want maximum pressure everywhere, sanctions as the go-to solution, and moral posturing as a substitute for strategic thinking. This approach has failed repeatedly, but they keep pushing it because it makes them feel good about themselves, even when it doesn't achieve results. President Trump and Secretary Rubio understand that effective foreign policy requires flexibility, strategic thinking, and prioritizing American interests over international approval. Sometimes that means maximum pressure. Sometimes it means diplomatic engagement. And sometimes it means staying out of other people's conflicts entirely. The Iranian nuclear program directly threatens American allies and interests, so maximum pressure makes sense there. The Ukraine conflict, while tragic, is fundamentally a European problem that requires European solutions, with American support, not American leadership. The distinction matters because our resources and attention are limited, and we need to focus them where they can do the most good for American security and prosperity. Costa's questions also reveal the fundamental dishonesty of the establishment's approach to Russia. They spent 4 years during the first Trump presidency claiming that any engagement with Russia was treasonous, that Trump was compromised, and that we needed to treat Russia as an existential enemy. Now they're criticizing Trump for not being aggressive enough. This isn't principled foreign policy. It's partisan opposition research masquerading as serious analysis. The truth is that managing great power relationships requires sophisticated diplomacy, not bumper sticker slogans. Reagan understood this when he engaged with Gorbachev while maintaining military strength. Nixon understood this when he opened relations with China while competing with them globally. Trump understands this now as he works to end conflicts and reduce the risk of great power war. We need to remember that the ultimate goal of American foreign policy should be advancing American interests and protecting American lives, not satisfying the moral preening of Washington establishment figures. Sometimes that means tough sanctions and maximum pressure. Sometimes it means diplomatic engagement and negotiated settlements. The key is having leaders smart enough to know the difference and strong enough to resist pressure from those who profit from perpetual conflict. This exchange between Costa and Rubio perfectly illustrates why we need Trump's America First approach to foreign policy. The establishment wants us to treat every international problem like a nail because the only tool they know how to use is a hammer. Trump and his team understand that different problems require different tools, and the measure of success isn't how tough you sound in congressional hearings. It's whether you actually solve problems and advance American interests. That's why this channel exists, Patriots. We're here to cut through the establishment noise and focus on what actually matters for America's future. If you found this analysis helpful, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content that puts America first. And remember, you can support our work at patreon.com/AmericaFirst for as low as $5 a month. The swamp wants to keep us in endless conflicts that benefit defense contractors and foreign policy consultants, while American families pay the price. President Trump's approach offers a better way forward, one that prioritizes peace through strength and America First principles. That's the message we need to keep spreading, and that's the fight we need to keep fighting. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and always put America first.